process that's on the. Okay, thank you.
He would have to go there all the time, so he's 6'4". I usually go. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, you can imagine.
All right, are we good with me going live to Facebook?
We are, Taylor, thank you.
I don't know.
I know you do.
Okay. Technical difficulties.
We are live.
We are live. All right, good evening, everyone. This is a meeting of the Village of Sherwood Hills Board of Trustees, a town hall facilitated by the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. Tonight is Tuesday, April 28th. It is 6:04 p.m. Let's call the meeting to order. Taylor, would you like to do the roll call?
You bet. Harford,
Here?
Litterer,
Here.
Lutfig,
Here.
Olsvik,
Here.
Lutschig,
Here.
Van Aston,
Yeah, one.
Imes,
Present.
one last time, Van Aston.
Okay, item 3.
Regardless, we have quorum.
Thank you, Taylor. Item 3, statement of public notice. Just want to confirm that the meeting was properly noticed.
Yes, it was.
Procedures orientation, just want to remind folks that this meeting is also being broadcast on the Village's Facebook page. Any comments or questions won't be received contemporaneously by those of us at the meeting, but that information, those emails, those messages can be sent directly to Village Administrator Brian Moody. Item 5, approval of the workshop agenda. Motion, Mark?
They're all motion to approve the workshop agenda.
There's a second. Thank you, Carol. Discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor? That motion carries. And then item 6, League of Wisconsin Municipalities presentation. Jerry, are you kicking us off?
I am.
Okay. Welcome, Jerry DeShane. Who are you again?
A long story,
Yeah.
somewhat sorted. Normally, where would you prefer me to work from?
Whichever spot works best for you.
Okay. I mean, I'll be comfortable standing here, but I've noticed cameras have a flaw when I stand like this. They shine back there. I don't know what that is. But so here, there. Does that work for everybody? No. Well, may I, Carol?
Yeah, is the microphone on?
Okay, yeah.
It might be on.
It seems to be.
Is it
No,
not?
would I
Hold the button first. I think it might.
power button?
Yeah. There.
There we go.
Finger. Now we're working. Oh, that's gonna make me crazy. Okay, let me start off with some introductory comments, but what I really am hoping to do tonight is walk through the document that we emailed, which was the observations from our last meeting. Because this is not the league saying, here, do this and you'll be happy. This is the league saying, this is what we saw, here's what we heard. Let's work together and what if anything do you want to do with that? but first of all, to sort of jump back a step, the league itself, let me introduce the league, then I'll introduce myself and my role. The league was created by a University of Wisconsin-Madison professor and the mayor of the city of Madison back in 1898. Leagues were sort of one of the progressive movement's good government efforts. And what we are is basically a network of our members. There are ballpark 607, Emily, did I get that number right? 190 cities and another 417 villages in Wisconsin. Virtually all of them are members of the league, even though we're a voluntary organization. We're a nonprofit, we're nonpartisan, just like local governments are. And my shorthand explanation of who we are is we're here to help you do your job. Whatever that is, and it's morphed over the years in a lot of different ways. The league exists to help cities, villages in Wisconsin work through whatever the problems of the day are. You know, over time, I tell people we wrote the book on local government because we literally have a book. It's about that thick. Ryan, is there a copy of it in your
I
office?
believe there is.
Yeah. But we have 3 full-time attorneys on staff. And something that I like to point out to village board, city councils in particular, we are not just Brian's resource. We're your resource, if you are affiliated with a city, the police chief, the public works director, you can have access to league resources. Now, as far as my role and why am I the one doing the talking, I drew the short straw, I lost. No, in all seriousness, I'm the executive director of the league. And my particular expertise and passion is boards. I currently personally sit on 7 different boards. I chair a school board. I've done that for 18 years. I was on the Stoughton Public School Board for 8 years. I have been involved in and around local government for my entire professional career, which ballpark is about 46 years, in case you're keeping track. What that means is I have made far more mistakes than any of you on this board will ever be able to make. And a lot of what I have to say tonight is driven by that. I've seen it. We have 3 full-time attorneys that have taken ballpark 3,000 phone calls a year from local governments. A lot of what you're, if I may be so bold, struggling with, we've seen before. It's not new. But I want to assure you that we're here to be an aid. We don't have any particular agenda. I've gone out of my way not to view prior minutes or prior meetings or anything like that. I wanted a fresh look at what you're doing here. So that's kind of me and that's kind of the league. I am backed up by Jared and Emily. They are our training staff at the league. We also have 2 new experts from out of town. They will correct us if we get off base at all. Those are Emily's daughters. So after the last meeting, we put this summary together, and what I'd like to do is walk through it fairly quickly and just if you find something that truly resonates, call that out. If you find something you question or you'd like to emphasize, call that out. Because where this is going at the end of this document, we have a number of recommendations of things that we think will help you with some of the frustrations that we think we saw and we think were in the atmosphere, if you will. It's not written in the document, but my observation would be basically, you're a small town in a big city. I mean, that's obviously, you're a small community. You've got the resources of a small community. You've got, you know, the levy limit issues that's strangling every community in this state. And you're in a big and fast growing metro area. So every community in Wisconsin is unique, but you're not Milwaukee, you're not Madison, you're never going to be Milwaukee or Madison, but you're not the village of Thorpe either. I mean, you're not a rural community. You just have a lot of different things going on. So let me jump down to what we heard. When we talked to the people at these tables last week, we heard a lot of people saying very positive things about their community. This is a place people live because they really want to live here. We heard privileged, we heard connected, invested, engaged, participatory. We also heard words like challenging. There's a real genuine affection for the village, but then there's a tension, and particularly it seems, I don't know other issues in the community, but it seems to be a surrounding village business. Experiences that have shaped you, the 2018 flood, disasters, quite frankly, have a way of pulling communities together. Since post-COVID, you've run into some trust issues. We also heard a lot of communication challenges from the public, from trustees, from staff. I mean, there's I don't know about a disconnect, but there does not seem to be a shared consensus that if I want information about the village, it's available X. One of the things that quite frankly surprised me a little bit was that a lot of your communication to the public is through Facebook. And I will leave my own editorial opinions about Facebook aside, but what you're struggling with is that there really isn't local media like there used to be. When local governments got their start, there were local reporters. My first career was as a local radio reporter. What I did for 6 years, I would go to meetings like this. I'd go to city council meetings and school board meetings. Those people are no longer there. And a lot of communities throughout Wisconsin are struggling with how do we keep them? And when I say them, no offense, folks, I'm talking about the community. How do we keep the community informed? And that is a struggle. That came through a lot that we heard at our last meeting, was that it's either non-uniform or there's at least a perception that it's non-uniform. And that's something later on when we talk about things to do, that is something I would encourage you to put high on the list. What do we want to become? Again, I heard a lot of very positive things about the community. You do have a lot going for you. You have a lot of budget challenges, but again, that's not unusual. So I'm going to take a deep breath before I flip the page. I see a few nods. I don't see anybody looking death daggers at me. What do you think? Am I hearing what? Okay. Yeah. Nobody wants to throw me out yet. Okay. After the public input session, Emily and Jared and I stuck around for a while. Actually, Jared watched you on Facebook, and I saw a lot of things going on with the board that I think the league can be helpful with. There was a fair amount of confusion, angst, frustration, and it's a myth that we all know how to do Robert's Rules of Order. And quite frankly, the problem with Robert's Rules of Order is it's 800 pages long. It was actually built for assemblies of hundreds of people. There are ways to boil that down. I think you've all gotten our Robert's Rules card. One of the things that when our attorney, who's the real expert on Roberts, gives a talk to local governments, he encourages them, and I encourage you to think about slowing down and getting formal. When boards get frustrated with each other, one of the things that is actually helpful, and it was actually a purpose of Robert's Rules, was to slow you down, put a motion on the table before you act, speak when recognized, try not to interrupt one another. Don't do friendly amendments because there really is no such thing in Robert's Rules. The other benefit to that is it helps the public follow what you're doing. Local government's already confusing. I mean, it's just what we do quite often doesn't make any sense to members of the public. But if I could offer one kind of primary recommendation along with communications, it would be to slow down and get formal with your board processes. On those observations from the board meeting, anyone you want to contradict or edit or clarify or add to, Mark?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think there are some very simple things we could do as a board. Like when someone makes a motion, instead of proceeding to look for the second and move ahead, we should perhaps turn to the clerk and say, okay, you've heard the motion. Did you record the motion? Does the motion need to be restructured to conform to Robert's rules? Do we all understand which one of the 20 rules it falls under? Because most of the time it's pretty standard, right? Somebody makes a motion, there's a second, the majority of the board rules, it can be amended and so on. But for at least a half dozen of these motions, it's a little different. And it would, I think, be good for the board to know that in advance. If somebody makes the motion, Taylor reviews the motion, Taylor says, yes, I've got the motion, I captured the motion, and then informs the board, this motion doesn't require a second. This motion is not debatable. This motion requires a 2/3 majority. Anything that makes this motion out of the ordinary. And going through that process, even if we don't need it so much, I'm not saying we don't, but even if we don't, it does slow down things. And so that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and Taylor is going to want continuing ed in Robert's rules. But the other thing that I didn't hear you say, Mark, and I think those were excellent suggestions, is quite often, whether it's Taylor or frankly the presiding officer, should restate what he heard the mover say. You know, Brian, I heard you move that, you know, we ought to build a statue in Jerry DeShane's honor. You know, is that the correct statement, or did I? That helps avoid confusion, and it, you know, you don't spin off into other eddies of debate and discussion. So that was a very good point. I want to add another thought here that I should have said at the front end. There is a great amount, we throw the word civility around a lot, and you all took and signed a civility pledge. There is a fear, I'll call it, that civility is a way to whitewash and suppress dissent. That is certainly not what's intended. Civility is to enable people who disagree with each other to work through their business. And whether you call it civility, whether you call it formality, I don't care, do whatever works. But the point is, it is not, and my presentation tonight is not one of these, here's what you need to do to get along. I frankly don't care if you get along. The point is there's a proper way to get through this business in a more formal manner, in a manner your citizens can understand and follow in this day and age of watching everything on Facebook, especially the, oh my God. Anyway, blind spot. Terrible. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on that part of it?
Well, my only comment is, I think we need more clarity on roles.
Mhm.
I think the board should, each individual must be empowered to self-regulate and self-know the rules, and that it would be inappropriate for somebody else to say whether your motion is correct or not. But I think that when you join the board, you're not given any instruction. You're given zero training. Everybody's kind of looking around to figure out what to do. And I think that's something we could do better at.
Amen. I totally agree with you, Shabnam. And if you look back at our recommendations, one of the best practices that I recommend for communities is do onboarding for newly electeds, and frankly, bring the old ones along too. You had a disagreement at our last meeting over the election of the president pro tem. You know, John pointed out this is the way we've done it for 14 years. You or someone pointed out that's not what the ordinance says. Wisconsin is goofy in that every city, and no cities and villages don't operate the same way. Everyone's different. Everyone has local operations and procedures. Another example, if you have a question about an agenda item, a lot of cities and villages, the city administrator says, no problem. Call the department head and ask him before the meeting, or her. Either they can answer the question or they'll know what to come prepared to the meeting with. There are, however, other cities and villages where the administrator, for good reasons, doesn't want board members contacting department heads. Those local rules and practices, an onboarding session would do you a world of good. Where you simply sit down with Brian and talk through what are the norms that we work with. I would do a real quickie on Robert's Rules of Order. What are the basics? When we make a motion, it's this. When there is a second. And by the way, something you said, I didn't mean to suggest, and I don't think Mark meant to suggest that Taylor is going to edit motions. I think it's more a matter of Taylor making sure he got the motion right. And also if it's, oh, what's a favorite motion? A motion to end debate. We hear this all the time. People, I make a motion to move the question. Well, that's fine, but that motion, A, you have to be recognized. B requires a second, and C requires a 2/3 vote. There are so many governing bodies out there that get that wrong. But little things like that. Did I take you down a rabbit hole that?
I want to bring another example that maybe you could shed some light on if
Sure.
from the last board meeting. There's a moment where Bill Cole is the attorney online telling us about an ordinance change. Julie has an opinion. All of us have an opinion. It's like we're learning what governance is on the spot in real time. And I think that's maybe our biggest issue.
Good.
There's disagreement among staff and the attorney and the trustees on what the rules are.
Again, I go back to, this is why I strongly encourage, and even now, now that the new board members are seated, find the time, and here's the downside, it's gonna mean another meeting for all of you. Find the time to do an onboarding session. We can provide Brian with a couple of examples of cities that do them. And it helps. It really does. And it's not an indoctrination session. It is simply, here's how to find out if I have questions, where do I get them answered? Like you said, I don't have to learn governance at 7:30 on a Tuesday night. Go ahead, Carol.
Follow up on that, which is to say that when I was first elected, I went to, I think it was Local Government 101 or whatever the course is that the league puts on, which is great because it fit my schedule. But if the content of all of that is available for everyone, for those who might not be able to make it on that weekend,
Yes.
I don't know, is it available?
Yes, so we,
Where did your experts go?
they went to consult their attorney. We just launched 3 of the 7 local government basics online modules. Brian should have provided you all with credentials to access them. So we're launching the remaining 4 here in the next couple months. And then we also have our League Locally programming where we're going to do a training on Robert's Rules. And then we also rope you into a mock meeting where you get to practice some of those.
It wouldn't let me be the chairman. I understand why not. Brian, you look like you wanted to say something, but I don't want to put you on the spot. Okay, right. I'm looking through my notes because I have a memory of a bug. Yeah, the whole, there apparently is a thing about the committees that you have. I mean, there again, that's something, have they been put on hold or something? I didn't understand. Okay. There seems to be a fair amount of angst about that, and if there's an orderly way to move that to a conclusion. Again, I'm not here offering silver bullets, but the best advice I can offer is there are issues, and you bring them up, you put them on the agenda in an orderly way, you knock them off, you take the vote. I mean, it just, after a while, you'll be amazed at how much easier it is. So recommended focus areas for training. So this is where Emily and Jared and I agreed on, these are the things that we think would help based on what we heard. Robert's Rules. We have the training modules available. I have to admit something. You're a little bit of a guinea pig for us. We get calls about situations like this about once a week. We have resisted doing on-site training. So part of our purpose in being here is to talk with you and sort of watch you and see what's working and what's not working so that we can do this with other communities. So when I say I want feedback, I really want feedback. When it comes to the Roberts Rules piece, because the president has a unique role to play, and I don't understand the president pro tem position, I would take that one step further. If the three of us wanted to sit down and sort of talk through some of those things, I'd be happy to do that. Again, I'm the league. Our job is to help you do your job. You tell me what that looks like, and we would be happy to do that. Role clarity. I think you brought this up earlier. A lot of cities and villages have position descriptions, and they're position descriptions that weren't sitting in a file cabinet for 20 years. They're actually what the board agrees, yes, that is the position of a trustee. That is the position of the president. That is the position of the president pro tem, whatever. That would help with role clarity. And again, share all of that with your public because they're obviously very engaged. They want to know. Process and procedure, I talked about that. I think I don't need to hit that any harder. A board orientation session. Again, I think it would be very helpful. I would be happy to volunteer Emily to work with you to put that together. Did she hear that? Oh, yeah. But seriously, we would, because we want to learn from you as we do this. Open meetings law. I mean, there was some suggestion about trustees exchanging opinions and views by telephone. I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole. That's just not. There are quick and easy ways to get in trouble. I think you all know that. But again, we have attorneys that can help advise on what is appropriate, what is not appropriate. Making sure the public knows where the information about city matters is located. That appeared to be something that's lacking. And then my last comment is what I had said earlier, just slow down. So that's sort of a bird's eye view of what we heard, what we recommend. My suggestion, well, let me back up before I make my suggestion. Any other questions or feedback or pushback? What didn't you hear that you want to hear? Who do I call in?
Mark.
So I think it's kind of the gray areas of governance that sometimes are the most difficult. And I would just offer an example, the issue of walking quorums.
Mhm.
I mean, as trustees, we don't just want to debate these issues in this meeting for during this several hours allocated to it. We have a desire and I think a need to consult with our colleagues outside the context of the meeting. Now, obviously, if we've got 7 of us on the telephone, that's going to be a problem. But if it's one person on the telephone, one email, it's obviously not a problem. But it's those, when does 2 or 3 trustees all of a sudden become a quorum in some way? And we have to kind of figure that out as we go along. And I think that's the difficulty, because when you're dealing with Robert's rules, these are the rules. It's pretty clear.
And let me offer our attorneys up for that, because we get that question on a very frequent basis.
Imagine you would.
And on the one hand, it's gray, but there's a point at which gray becomes black, and it happens real fast. Because what will happen is she will call you, you will call him. All of a sudden, 3 of you have arguably, in the court of public opinion, colluded on what your position is. Even though I could never suggest the law doesn't make sense, even though common sense says, yeah, you want to see if there's support for this idea. But you can't come anywhere near a majority. You can't come anywhere near what's called a negative majority. In other words, if let's say 3 of you talked about this in a walking quorum, 1 of you was absent from a meeting when the motion came up. Well, guess what? 3 votes is enough to kill that issue. So all of a sudden, it could be argued you violated open meetings law. And
Well, I had something else to say, but I'm gonna go off what Mark is saying. Because I actually don't think, I think I understand what Mark is trying to describe. I'm not convinced that we have walking quorums. I'm convinced that people just want to talk to each other and maybe talk about a previous decision and how that went. But if anybody talks to anybody, oh my God, you're breaking a rule. It was just a conversation about like something that is not even going to be on the board, but everybody's terrified that if I walk in the street next to Mark, you committed a crime. I think we've gone to the other extreme. I'm not convinced that anybody on the board is like rallying votes.
well, and don't get me wrong, I am certainly not suggesting that anybody on the board is. As far as I'm concerned, these are hypothetical questions.
It's the opposite though. That's the issue.
Yeah, and boy, we've never polled our members on how many of them break the law. But where I'm going with this, I grew up in northern Wisconsin. I grew up in a small village where my dad was the village president, my mom was the treasurer, my brother was a trustee, my other brother was the constable. I'm not making this up. Just simply having dinner felt like a violation of open meetings law. You're right, it is hard, and you ought to be able to talk to another alder about an issue, a trustee about an issue, and you can. It gets gray and fuzzy if you take it further than that. Because what I would do if I were in your shoes and there was a controversial vote coming up, I want to call a majority of I'm a lobbyist by trade. I count votes. So I'd want to call people up and say, okay, Kate, where are you on this? You okay with this? And all of a sudden I've broken the law. It is very inconvenient at that extreme. Can two of you talk about something over coffee at a coffee shop? Yes, you can. Three of you, I wouldn't do three of you on an issue that is likely to come before the board. Will the Dane County District Attorney haul you in on that one? I doubt it. We can only give you, I like to cop out by saying, I can't tell you what to do. We can only tell you what our interpretation of the law is. By the way, I'm not an attorney, so I shouldn't even do that. There are no short answers from me. I apologize. But did I?
Yeah. My second thought though was, I just think we don't have a process for solving disagreements. Like, what is a CIP? What is the value of it? What is the purpose of it? We'll disagree, but we actually don't have a process for solving issues. It's whoever's the loudest or whoever's position is stronger. There's not a impartial, fact-based driven, law-based driven way of answering a lot of the questions outside of Robert's Rules of Order.
Without asking for a specific example, I'm struggling with this because I want to reflect back to you and say, yes, you do. You have majority vote. You have request that it be put on the agenda. You have a process for that. Request the information that you need, and there should be a logical process for that. Once everyone has the same information, it's on the agenda, you debate it, you vote, it passes or fails. Where does it fall apart?
So, I mean, let's just use the CIP as an example.
And keep in mind, I'm purposefully ignorant. I don't know what you're talking about.
Capital improvement plan.
Okay, yep. I
So
hate acronyms too, by the
Sure.
way.
we'll be discussing what projects should be budgeted for the following year.
Sure,
And-
it should.
And somebody will say, this is statutory, we must pass it tonight, we cannot change anything, it's required, and don't worry about it because it doesn't mean anything, so please approve. And then 6 months later, it's like, well, and you can change it later, but then 6 months later, you can't change it because it was in the CIP, which we have to do what's budgeted. And then it'll be a year later, and I think it was a resident who was like, what are you guys talking about? This is not a statutory requirement at all. So so what is the rule? What what is this real? Is it not? Is it statute? That's the problem.
So, okay, I'm not gonna play lawyer anymore. Is your first question, are you required to have a capital improvements plan?
No, I'm saying is how do you resolve an issue that nobody knows what the rules are? Are you required to have a capital improvement plan? Is it statutory? Because in discussion, if you didn't get any training, you come in, you're told this is required right now. You must approve this. You know, we have a December 1st deadline, but that's not true. We don't actually have a December 1st deadline. We have a budget deadline. It's not a capital improvement plan deadline.
In that specific example, the recommendation that I would have is you need to have a budget briefing at the beginning of the process. Here's what needs to go into that budget. Here's what always has gone into that budget. Because I don't think a capital improvements plan is statutorily required, but frankly, if you don't do it, you're really foolish. You need to be planning capital improvements, capital upgrades, But my answer to your question is this is the sort of thing that, like an onboarding session, when you go into the budget development process, there should be a conversation, and it should involve your staff and the board, and you ask these sorts of questions. Why do we do things this way? Brian, I apologize if I'm making your job harder, but do you see where I'm going with this? It's trying to get everybody leveled up to the same place. You know, at the end of the day, you may be in favor of building that statue to me, or you may think we can't afford it. But the point is everyone should have the same information. Mark?
Yeah, and I think that's where the benefit comes from slowing down and understanding where different trustees are. Because if you feel like, well, we're discussing the issue and there's just no point to continue the discussion, somebody's going to move the question, but that may leave a trustee feeling left out because their question never really got answered, but the question was put to the board and the majority of the board said, let's vote on this and move on. So to me, this is just a situation where you were talking about earlier, slow down and just be cognizant, aware of where other trustees are and what's behind their concerns and see if you can resolve it. And if you can't, maybe the issue just needs to be put off. I mean, it's a matter of figuring out, is this something we have to vote on today? We have to close it because of time pressures or deadlines, or is this something we can put off so that we can have time to resolve whatever the concern or uncertainty is?
Not a bad point. The other thing I want to say, and then I'll go back to you, is remember that there's a fair amount of turnover. And what I often hear when I go to a city council meeting, board meeting is, this is the way we've done it every year for 20 years. Well, guess what? I wasn't here, last week. I don't know. So I don't know what I don't know.
Last comment, I won't say anything else. But if we're struggling with what we're doing, what chance do the residents have to understand what's going on?
I agree.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just reflecting on this conversation, I think for me, the challenge is on norms. Because I think, I think some of the rub is, we have our ordinances, we have our bylaws, it's pretty black and white. But the norms piece, I think, is where there's the gray area. And I think some people want to leverage the norms when it's, advantageous to them, and some don't. Norms seem to change, depending on who's talking. And so I think that's for me, the informal norms is where I think we get hung up a little bit. And I totally agree. Just because something has been done a certain way does not mean it is the right way. I mean, there was a time when men were appointing only other men in the village to serve as trustees. They weren't even elected positions. Do we want to go back to that time? I certainly don't think so. So that was a norm, And so I think maybe this board is just questioning, the norms that have been passed down, do those work in 2026? Does that work with this current community? And I think that's kind of where some of the, tension can come, because It's like we have done it this way for a while, but is that the right way? And that's, I would encourage all of us to try to have that open mind to approach it. Like, does this work for 26? You know, where we are as a community today, you know?
Totally agree. Sean, did you?
No.
Emily, Jared, am I forgetting anything? Okay. Other feedback, questions? I'm sort of at the end of the document. I have a sort of, if you choose to take action recommendation for you, but I'll hold on to that for now. You're not taking any action tonight, correct?
No.
Any other questions or reflections? Another offer that I would make to each of you individually is if you want to talk about any of this stuff, give me a call. I'm here in Madison. It's where our office is. I'm available. Excuse me. I'm in Madison. I'm not here in the Winchell. Insult you. But I'd be happy to talk about it. I can't obviously get involved if there's a, well, this part of the board believes this, that part believes that. I can't help with that. But if you want to talk about best practices, if you want to look at examples, if you want me to explain something a little bit more, or drag one of my attorneys into the conversation, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Jerry, I was going to add, I mean, this is a town hall format, so will we provide an opportunity for residents or staff to kind of react or ask questions of you? I'd like to extend that opportunity, staff certainly, and to any of the residents, or any comments, questions, because we've got some great expertise here in the room that can help reply. Thanks. Any questions, thoughts? Fred, go ahead.
Fred Wade, I was on the board for 14 years,
Thank you.
4 years on the finance committee for 14. I think one of the big problems that board hasn't addressed growing up is the CIP, capital improvement plan that Jeff now mentioned. Because we went through a period when we borrowed a lot of money to rebuild the roads on the east side of the village. And then we didn't have enough money to really make any major capital improvements for many years. So the process of identifying what needed to be done and discussing it, providing options for the board to consider, didn't happen because it were only pro forma numbers to bring things along. And what Shabnam was concerned about, the board members sit down, they've got a timeline to do the budget and the CIP, and they've got no options, nothing really worked out that they could turn to and say, what do we choose to do?
Well, a couple of thoughts. I mean, first of all, I will repeat again, I don't care if you're the city of Madison or the city of Milwaukee or the village of Stockholm, population 78. I think every municipality ought to have a capital improvements plan. I hope that I'm not stepping on anybody's toes here when I say you're the board, lay out the budget timetable you'd like to see. Work with your staff and we're all in a place where quality talent is going to become harder and harder and harder. And I won't mention the name of the city, but there's a city that hired a search consultant because their administrator left. They had to bring the search consultant back to serve as the interim administrator because nobody applied for the job because they were that city. You can quickly earn a reputation as a place nobody wants to work. You don't want that. So that's my pitch for working with your staff. But to the gentleman's point about having time, and to your point about having time, having options, frankly, you're the board. I mean, have that conversation. Don't have it in October. Have that conversation well enough in advance where you can agree on a budget development timetable.
So I wasn't on the board at that time, but I watched that process go down, right? And there were 3 or 4 budgets that the staff was asked to be able to do, right? And by the time the budgets came and one was selected, there was no time for people to sit down and try to mull things over or work together as a group. Because that time had lapsed, because everybody, so much time had been spent just trying to figure out which one of the things was going to happen, that there was no chance for anybody to mull it over. It was, here it is, here's the presentation on it, vote on it, we need you to vote on it now. And that is how that went down, because that process was so overshadowed by potential purchase the village was looking at that was going to radically change the way that it looked. So there was, from an outside perspective looking in, the board didn't, I mean, I don't know how much role they played, Brian, but from the outside looking in, it looked like you and the staff put together that budget in the last minute with some feedback, and then boom, it went to the consultants, and boom, it was out the door for everybody to see. It didn't seem like, I watched no board discussions where everybody went through what it was and asked what it was, and came, how should we spend our money? I saw no board action like that whatsoever. Did that happen somewhere else? How did that happen? Was that just you just had to come up with it on your own because you had no choice?
For the final budget?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the driving force behind it, and for full context for those obviously joining who weren't a part of the experience last year. So we were going through the process of looking at acquiring an existing property within the village to serve as the site of the new village hall and police station. And so in this series of the lead up of considering that in acquisition, the staff and I ended up having to put together a few different iterations of that potential acquisition in different versions of a capital improvement plan. So some had them in it, some had us borrowing money differently to acquire it earlier. Some had, if we pushed the acquisition into the following year, we needed to get that all assessed and figure out what way were we going to proceed with the CIP once the decision was known as far as how we were going to proceed with that acquisition. So a couple different iterations occurred. Once that decision was made, we had a more clear path for which CIP we were going to use to fill out the rest of the borrowing for the year and into the budget. So it kind of made it a more clear approach, but from pieces of the budget, that goes back all the way to the beginning of the year when we had the police ad hoc retention recruitment committee making recommendations for salary and ways of enhancing police retention, and then some of the factors that are built into the police way of doing the budget that was taken into account for the staff side of things when we could figure out how much money we might have. So a lot of those pieces don't really show themselves or aren't readily available until you actually get into the budget process. So it makes it a little tougher. Last year was just an incredibly difficult.
Normally not like last year.
Circumstance. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Shabna?
Sorry. I heard you say something. You said you're the board. Like you're the board. And I think that makes me think the tension is that sometimes some board members say, stay in your lane. You can't tell the administrator what to do. So that's where we also have need guidance, because it's like, I'm the board. we're supposed to give direction. But then half the time it's like, you can't tell them what to do. So when can you and when can you not? Does that make sense? Was I clear?
Yes, what you're asking is clear. I want to be clear in response. I was talking about the timing of you adopting a budget. You're the board, the budget belongs to you. I would recommend.
You want to stay in frame.
Yeah.
Well, but then I'm standing in front of him. Be careful not to overinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not telling you to tell Brian when he can lick a postage stamp, right? But something like the budget, yes. Working with your staff, it is perfectly acceptable for the board to adopt a budget timetable. Now, it sounds to me like there were some really big variables in last year's budget that came in somewhat later in the process. And, sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. But that's where clearly the board has the authority. You're responsible for that budget. Am I answering your question?
Yes, I would say in the last 4 years, I don't think one trustee has made one change to a proposed budget because you just can't. The budget is presented to you in October and you have to approve it because it's got to be printed in the newspaper and it's got to be approved by December. So no matter what year you come with board suggestions for the budget, it's too late. You have procedural process in the sense that you have posted a notice in the newspaper, but you don't have substance if you can't make changes or edits. Does that make sense?
I do, and I'm trying to resist the temptation of saying, why can't you ask that a preliminary budget be presented to you and frankly, I would ask a finance director from another community what they do. Because that's not what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about adopting a budget timetable, what staff are working on it and when does it go to subcommittees? Once it's at committees, when does it go to a board for preliminary approval and discussion? Most communities I'm familiar with, they have a process like that.
We've done that.
I'm not a finance director. I'm not here to tell you what that looks like, but I'm sure there are good examples of it out there. Carol?
Yeah, I think in my experience, part of the tension with that budget process comes because Brian and the staff struggle, like every other municipality, to make a balanced budget. And we see it at the budget hearing, and then we approve it at the next meeting. And so we can all see it, but it feels like this thing that if you pulled on one thread, the whole thing would come undone because there's so much that has to be done and there's no give. And so I don't know how to get around that feeling that, here's the budget, we must approve it because it's a balanced budget and we have to have one. It's hard to know where you can pull on threads and not ruin it. So, yeah, that's maybe part of the reason why it comes across that way.
Yeah, in general, when it comes to budgeting, you're a village in the state of Wisconsin, you're doomed. I'm sorry, levy limits make budgeting, particularly for communities like yours, unsustainable. So you, the board, are going to have to make some very unsavory decisions, but you have to. That you get the big money for that. But you ought to be able to agree on a timetable that gives you, the board, a meaningful opportunity to at least get to know the budget and the assumptions that went into it. John, you said something about the board has done more of a budget development process. I don't know if you or members of your staff are members of GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association. I would ping them for some examples of budget timetables. Mark?
Yeah,
But the decision at the end of the day is still going to suck. I just want to let you know.
yeah, and unfortunately, this year is almost going to be as difficult as last in some respects because our financial director, treasurer, has announced they're leaving. We're going to need to fill that position. The audit has not been completed, so we don't even know where our starting point is in preparing the budget. And we still have major questions about facilities, capital planning, and the like, that at least with respect to 2027, will be part of the budget in addition to the part of the CIP. So they're not going to be optional in that sense. So there's going to be time pressure simply because without the staff, without the audit being completed, it's very hard to get the budgeting process started as early as we would like. And the clock runs quickly. So I'm just sharing that with the board, the finance committee. I'm sure will do the best they can. And Brian has put together calendars in the past, but they're very hard to stick to if you don't have the data and you don't have the staff. And that's kind of the spot we're in.
Yeah, I can see that. But at least that does give you an opportunity to inform the rest of the board. And normally, July 1, you would see this. Here is what, this is what we agreed to, here's why you can't see it. Then you have it out over that. The other thing I want to say is, it's the end of April already. We're not gonna wave the magic municipal wand here and make everything run like clockwork. I would encourage you to pick a couple of things in our suggestions and implement those, whether it's a budget timetable or training in Robert's Rules of Order, or slowing down, whatever you choose to do an onboarding session. Don't try to do too much. You already have too many things to do. Understand that everybody sitting around this table is human. We're still going to make mistakes, but you can start moving forward.
Any other reactions, questions? Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, hi. My name's Dan Moser. I've lived in the village 52 years now. And I've watched this over the years and I love it here, of course, like we all do. And I intentionally wasn't involved because of the job I had. I didn't get involved in politics at this level, but I don't have that job anymore. I'm retired from that. I thought tonight's purpose was to figure out how to do this better, not to get into details about budgets and plans and stuff. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I'm going to say what I want to say on several topics. Civility. I don't think signing a piece of paper makes anybody civil. I think it's kind of a sophomoric exercise that doesn't really get you anywhere. I was a judge for a long time and we had similar issues and somebody thought we ought to have civility plaques with rules, and so somebody paid for them and we distributed them and they ended up being used to prop doors open. Probably the best use was to put the coffee pot on as a trivet, but they really don't do anything. And I'm not sure signing a piece of paper does it either. You're all adults. You don't need a piece of paper to do it. A few years ago, I got interested in a topic and started watching your meetings. And I'll pretend this is all about previous boards, so that it's not personal, but there's very common threads that make it harder for this board to do things. The slow down advice, I think, is really maybe the most important thing I've heard today. But there are some board members who feel that they can speak whenever they feel like speaking. And they do it repeatedly. They do it all the time. And it's irritating to the other board members. When I'm watching the meetings, I listen more to the person that raised their hand and talked and stayed on topic, as opposed to going to some other topic. Your meetings are twice as long as they need to be, and part of this because everyone speaks when they want to speak. Not everyone, many speak when they want to speak. I would encourage you to only speak on the issue before you. Just tonight's a good example. We're talking about a capital improvement plan or budgets. That really is what we're here for today. I'm concerned about the open meetings laws violations. I don't know if we're there yet or not. I'm concerned about what advice people are getting in that regard. But there's a real solid reason why you have open meetings laws. It's so everyone gets to hear everyone. And there's input from everyone. And you get the challenge, you get the question, you get the support or opposed. And if you don't do it at meetings, if you're doing it behind the scenes, you're defeating the whole purpose of it. And that's really not what you got elected to do. And there's penalties if you don't follow it. And I get the feeling there's already an agenda, and it's already happening. I hope we don't go any further. And I hope we follow it for good reasons. I guess I'll stop there. That's enough.
Thank you,
Thank
Judge.
you, Dan.
Is this going to 7, John?
I think we're close. So any other quick comments, Fred?
I just want to follow up on the, this issue of the CIP. If we got into a little bit. I regarded that, I reinforced discussion on that. And in part because I think the comment that was made about Barry Shabnam about too many issues just being out there and not the parent process to get them resolved. I think it was indicative of that kind of general problem. That a lot of things get up and they haven't gotten resolved. And so I thought that was why it was important to pick up on that. I think your suggestions make a lot of sense in that context.
Thank you.
Taylor, if you don't have anyone else raising their hand or anything, I think we're moving to adjournment.
If I may, real quickly,
Yeah.
Mr. President, members of the board, first, thank you for having me here. I would really encourage and hope you would cherry pick a couple of things in here that you really want to do and move forward with. We are here to help you more if more help is needed. As I said, you're our guinea pigs, John. We want to see what works here and then go tell everybody we fixed something, even though we didn't do anything. But thank you for what you do. I mean, I've been in your chair for a long, long time, and it's very important. And we're all citizens just trying to do the right thing. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, Jerry. Mark,
Motion to adjourn?
second. Thank you, Kate. All those in favor? Great to see everyone. Thanks again, Jerry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very appreciate it.
If it was me keeping you here, I apologize.
No, this was perfect.